Welcome into another edition of the Hops and Spirits Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Green, and it's another Flavorful February edition, and we'll be talking with a few folks from Starlight Distillery in Indiana here shortly. Christian Huber, James Wood, and maybe Christian's brother Blake might stop by for a little bit as well. Before we get into that, though, don't forget to join our Drinking Buddies monthly giveaway club, where we're giving away a sample from Starlight. They might not know that, but they're part of our giveaway. It's pretty simple. Go into any of our social media at Hops and Spirits on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, and just click the link and sign up. It's free. It takes a few seconds, and you could win some amazing whiskeys from several different distilleries and a whole bunch of different ages and types. So don't wait. Go do that right now. But I don't want to waste any more time, because Flavorful February was a lot of fun last week with Derek DeFranco of Mere Twin Brewing in Lexington, talking about how they do those crazy pastry stouts, sour ales, things with cereal in them. But now we're going to the whiskey side, because whiskey can be very flavorful, and it's a unique way to do it. So let's welcome in Christian Huber and James Wood from Starlight Distillery in Indiana. Guys, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Now, before we get rolling here, I always like to ask one very tough question. Sometimes to some it's tough, others it's just, very simple answer. But with our wonderful weather we have right now, do you all prefer the cold or the warm?
I'm gonna go in the middle there and just say I'm more of a moderate guy. If you give me like a nice 65 to 75, that's where I'm happiest for sure.
I was gonna say I lived in Ontario for a few years, so I'll take the warm. I put my time in on the cold. So
nothing wrong with that. You have very long winters in Canada. From a few of my buddies from back in college, I totally understand that. I'm kind of like you, James. I'm a spring and fall guy. Give me that nice 65, 70 degree weather with maybe a little cooler in the evenings, a little bonfire or fire pit going, and you can't really beat that in my mind.
Take a glass of whiskey outside, have a cigar, and that's a night.
Exactly. Now on to the actual maybe tougher questions. I'll start off with James on this one, just to make sure I'm doling things out a little evenly. For those that may not have joined us for our first episode with y'all, what can you tell us a little bit about Starlight? Because you're a distillery, but you have Huber Winery, the You Pick Orchard as well. So what's the background there at Starlight in Indiana?
Yeah, so basically current operations are we have a lot to do, to be honest. We're a full regional destination tour and visit site. We get folks from all over the region, and folks that fly in, maybe into Louisville or Indy, that will come down and visit us as well. But like you mentioned, we have the distillery and the winery. Those also include tours and tastings. Our tasting loft is completely open and still COVID friendly, if you will. So we're still following health and safety regulations and guidelines from local, state, and federal health officials here on property to make sure that everybody feels safe during the pandemic. But on the farm side of things, we're a 700-acre farm essentially, and we got the farm market, of course, that we sell a lot of our goods in. You also have the You Pick things that you can do here when fruits, vegetables, gourds, whatever's in season essentially, and that starts with strawberries in May. That you can go out, pick as much as you want. You basically pay by the pound after you're done, and then you can join us for some wine, whiskey, or take your kids down to the farm, kids farm area to play in. There's just all sorts of stuff to do, and it's just a great getaway for the day for anybody in the area. So if you've been, come on back. If you haven't been, we'd love to have you, because there's definitely something for everybody here.
I was going to say, it truly is a family type establishment, whether you want to have a night out for the adults or bring the kids as well. Christian, you're a generational distiller there. Your family has kind of run that for many generations, and you can track back all the way to before you guys came over here that you've been in some type of distilling history. What age did you get into distilling? Because I remember last time it was rather young and it might shock some people.
Oh yeah, again, it's a family business here. I mean, especially being in a family that historically has always been in beverage alcohol. Stemming back, 7 generations until we get into Germany, and then another 6 and 7 generations over there that we can track back as the winery. Where I fit into the piece of the puzzle was I was kind of on the wine side first. I was with my dad around the distillery and the winery when I was little, 8, 9, 10. But it was on my 13th birthday that he actually gave me the keys to actually run. It was Applejack Brandy by myself on the Christian Carl. We have a little 80-gallon Carl still up in the winery, the original still on this property. And like I said, when I turned 13, he gave me the keys and said, you know what to do. If you need any help, I'm here, but go right ahead. And he went back up to retail and he left me with this 80-gallon still and a minute of apple juice, and off I went. But I was born and raised. I mean, once you grow around something, it's more of a instinct nature kind of thing. I knew what the taste were. I knew how to cut. And again, I knew how to respect the alcohol at the end of the day and how to proof and how to get it into the right barrels. I mean, it just came down to, growing up around it and seeing it day after day.
And I was going to say, one of the things we're talking about here on Flavorful February is kind of how whiskeys get their flavor, bourbon as well. For those that just to give that general look at how the process works, not super detailed, but just a nice little overview, how does the distilling process go when you're making whiskey?
Well, whiskey, like I said, we have 2 distilleries here on the property, one for brandy and one for whiskey, because they are very, very different from each other. Whiskey takes an extra step, just like brewing, where you actually have to cook the grains. The cooking process, like I said, they're too complex of chains to actually ferment by themselves. For instance, when you go out into a cornfield, you crush up corn, it's not going to ferment, right? The opposite happens when you're in a vineyard or you're doing fruit. If you do crush up those grapes or those raspberries, blueberries, and leave them on the ground, they will ferment. So, distillation, when it comes to whiskey, you have that extra step. You have your 2 alpha amylase and your glucose amylase that will splice those certain starch chains down to where you actually can have a fermentable, quote-unquote, sugary liquid at that point. And once you splice those down, then it's about basically selecting your yeast. In distillation, we don't talk enough about that, in my personal opinion. Everyone tries to shroud of what yeast is, but as a winemaker, I can tell you we use quite a bit of different yeast from Firm Solution, which is the Wilderness Trail guys. We've been using them before they even had that distillery. From there, you go into your primary fermentation. Again, we're 100% sweet mash, so we inoculate our yeast fresh every single day, every single time. That way we know exactly what kind of yeast. Like I said, we have a Saccharomyces yeast, our VCA, that does the primary fermentation. At that point, like I said, it turns that sugary liquid into alcohol. And then we go full grains of that sugary liquid, fermented sugary liquid, into the actual still. The still will charge it. We are double pot distillation, so we have a 500-gallon Vendome brass and copper, custom built out with Dad and the guys over at Vendome. Big onion, big gooseneck into it, long 2% downgrade lyre arm that helps us really clean up high rye whiskeys. We have a low wine column with 5 plates and a heavy defumator on top, and then a condensing column. The first run, like I said, we're just looking to strip the alcohol off, concentrate it a little bit. The second run is where we're really finessing it, really making those exact cuts. At Starlight, a little different. We don't let any computer system or anything. It's all done by the person and by the distiller. There's no quote-unquote operating procedure that we have to cut at a certain proof. It's all done by taste. Jesse, our head distiller, and he does all our cooking. Myself, my brother, Ryan, and Jason, each and every day, it's up to us to figure out when we would like to cut it, how much oil should come across, because every day is a new day, right? When it's cold outside, when it's hot outside, the grains year after year are a little bit different. There's different oils or different starches, and all that plays into the final game of the whiskey. Again, we're not an ethanol plant by any means. We're doing craft distillation on a very, very small scale. But that's kind of without getting into the polyphenols and all different things behind it. I can get into the geekiness of it. That's like a very broad, 1,800 feet above it kind of level.
And that's what I always love about when I'm talking to whoever it is, whether it's Shane and the guys at Wilderness Trail, you all, you name it, just how much science goes into this, and how much of a process it is to really get to that amazing bottle at the end. And for those that are curious, there's a couple different when I think of whiskeys, you think of your straightforward whiskeys, maybe a barrel finish. One that I don't know gets talked a ton about, you all make a blackberry whiskey. How does that process differ to get that blackberry flavoring in there?
Well, like I said, I'd be a liar to say if all of our products are made our single barrel and our bourbon grade, right?
Hmm.
That's, like I said, knock on wood, very early on, we decided that we weren't going to go into with any investments or anything like that. And so we never had the pressure to put out bourbon. We always could, put the best we ever had, best foot forward every single time. Um, so Blackberry Whiskey was a product that was kind of created by accident, kind of created on a unique accident that kind of led into this beautiful product. But I mean, we're a fruit farm, right? We grow a lot of brambles, so blackberries, black raspberries, blueberries. So the blackberries that we have naturally on the property, like I said, you crush them down into a juice, and you concentrate that juice. And then we take some of the bourbon that hasn't quite made our grade. If it's too like I said, too husky, too grain forward, if it's just something wrong with the mouthfeel, aromatically, it's just not where we would like it, we basically deem that as a grade what was called blackberry whiskey. So we blend that sometimes 4 and 5 year old bourbon lots that just did not work into that blackberry, that concentrated blackberry. And then, like I said, we proof it down. And then again, blackberry has some instability, so we have to protein stable it. But for us, that was a way for us to, take what was also grown on the farm and create products that, like I said, might not be great by itself as a bourbon. Again, as any distillery does, you try all stuff and you don't know how it's going to turn out. At the end of the day, we didn't have to put that product out on the market as a bourbon or as a whiskey just because we had that backbone of that product. You basically take it in and get our money's worth out of it. And like I said, year after year, the colors change on it because the blackberry is concentrated. So it does show its vintage variation very, very well. Again, it's going to be our bourbon and also our re-ran tails. So as you know, historically, we're a very, very high cut, and a lot of distillers are, they ask us why we cut so high, why we do this. A lot of times we take those concentrated tails, we rerun it up the column to make light whiskey. We age that as well to go into the blackberry whiskey. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
But hey, nothing wrong with sometimes happy accidents. Some amazing products come out of those, and that's been kind of a newer thing, or at least maybe not newer, but one that I see more and more on the shelves are those flavored type whiskeys, and y'all have been doing it for a while.
Oh yeah, I mean it's nice to be able to have everything in our backyard basically picked from. We actually have a good crop of black raspberries, so being the first one, you're the first one to kind of hear it, and I mean leaking it out. We'll have a black raspberry bourbon liqueur that should be ready this summer. Again, this one is going to be at a liqueur stage, so a little bit under 80 proof, but being able again taking the actual bourbon that again didn't quite meet our single barrel grade or our bottle and bond grade, and taking that with our fresh black raspberries and making that liqueur out of it. It's something really really stellar, and if you like the kind of the black raspberry, that light purplish, beautiful color pulling through, and it has that nice high rye whiskey in the background of it. So we're really excited for that product as well.
Well, that sounds like something we all need to mark on our calendars and look forward to this summer, for sure. Now on the other side of the production, obviously what you put in the whiskey makes a big difference. Whether you're using different types of grains or where you get those from. One thing that I think a lot of people know somewhat about is the barrel, though, can play a big role. And how does that work? And kind of to me, what people might not know is there's many different types of barrels that you can put bourbon and whiskey into.
Well, and as you know, I think I said this last time. I mean, I did my senior thesis in oak, right? My brother did as well. Like I said, when I was living in Ontario and Blake was living in Cornell, we used to travel back and forth from Cornell University's lab and actually run the GC, their chromatography, just basically to see the overall aromatics that come derivative of oak precursors. Again, without getting too technical, oak plays a massive role in overall whiskey components of flavor production. So why people just threw it into one particular type of oak, I will not know. Mostly because again, if you're going for a certain flavor profile, like for instance, Woodford Reserve is always going to be Woodford, right? They don't want to
Hmm.
deviate from that. But when it comes to single barrels, you kind of want that differentiation. So again, with Starlight, we actually have 7 different cooperages throughout the United States. Again, some local boys like Kelvin Cooperage, I mean, right out of Louisville, Kentucky, going all the way up to Seguin Monroe, which is actually a French cooper out of Burgundy that produces American oak here in the States. Very, very high end, water bent, air dried wood. And all that plays in a precursor of what it is, where the wood is grown at, the way it's seasoned, the yard, the way it's toasted and charred, really plays a huge impactful to your overall flavor. For instance, like I said, we have different portfolios here. Like I said, our 3 grain mash bill that I like to produce, I use Kelvin Char 3s with toasted heads. My dad, for his 4 grain, prefers more the ISC, Cooper's Reserve, Cooper Select, Char 2, Char 3. My brother is a Canton fan, 1 to 2 and 3 to 4 chars with toasted heads and charred heads, 24-month air dried. Again, we have another one new in the portfolio. Thankfully, Heaven Hill kind of backed out some contracts, and now we have Zach Cooperage, which used to be Heaven Hill's exclusive or one of their exclusive producers for a lot of their products. Using a lot of their what we have all the way up to 48-month air dried wood from them and char 3. But again, the different charring levels vary from Cooper to Cooper. So, like I said, Kelvin's char 3, Zach's char 3, and Canton's char 3 are very different things, which makes it complicated for you as an consumer saying, oh, this was aged in Kelvin char 3, and then you go to a Canton char 3 and be like, well, this is different. And that's the uniqueness about each house. It expresses things differently. And again, without getting too like over the top, I mean, when you toast that barrel or char the barrel, I mean, you're pulling again a lot of precursors for your whiskey lactone. Like lignin is one of the main. Again, I get into like all the different precursors of it, but lignin going into your butterscotch, your caramel, your salted caramels, and like how the toasting process differs from the charring process, and how char has more of that outside of that carbon to be able to filter out heavier oils. It all comes into play. But unfortunately, as distilleries, we really don't talk about the differences inside each house. Again, there's like Forgate does a good job saying they use Kelvin, Peerless as well. But what does that actually mean is still something that a lot of consumers are still unknown about, and why each different cooperage and each different house produces such unique aromatics depending on what it is.
Well, and like you touched on there, it makes a difference in what we get in the final product because as everyone knows, bourbon whiskey ages in those spends quite a bit of time in one of those barrels, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. The charring process. Most people have now probably that are bourbon lovers have heard of the char process, but there are different, as you mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes up to 5, correct? Am I right on that? Or 4 on the charring process for some of the grades and so forth.
We go up to 4. Now,
4.
Kelvin has charred our barrels to no end. We actually had some burnt barrels that would be up there and closer to the 5 range, but for us, we stick to the classic 1 through 4.
But how does that play a role into it, and what does charring mean for someone that may not understand exactly what that is?
Well, like I said, charring nowadays in the age of how the bourbon boom is, I mean, there's a lot more what we call control around the charring process. Basically, what you have after you have your, let's say, oak that's cut down and then cut into staves, there's 2 methods that could go on because there's still a lot of liquid inside that tree at that point. You have to dry that wood, right? And the 2 options are kiln drying wood, where you send it through a kiln that gets the actual, like I said, liquid out, or you do air dry, which you set up in a stave in a yard for years and years and years, and the snow, the rain, the heat, the sun, the expansion and cool, it kind of seasons it just like you would season a grill or a smoker. Again, no wrong nor right. There's a big price difference between the 2. We follow under the air dried wood because we're craft, and again, having the wine background, again, I like a very seasoned wood. There's different precursors and different aromatics that you can pull versus the quote unquote kiln drying way. But let's say whatever one you pick, they build the barrel, but it's still at that point uncharred. I mean, it's just raw wood. So they have to put that over to a fire. And so the charring levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 is just the intensity of the heat and the length of time that that barrel is over top of that flame. So like I said, 1 is going to be very, very minimal. It's going to be like a quick toasting almost rather than a charring. Again, that's enough, again, to basically break that outer layer down a little bit, char it just enough that the whiskey is going to get a little bit of carbon inside there, a little bit of lignins can form. And as it goes up in intensity, 2, 3, and 4, you're going deeper and deeper into that wood, more of that like carbon on the outside that can filter out those heavier, fattier acid or oils, excuse me. And then, like I said, you're building more of those precursors of lignin and stuff like that. But on the flip side, why we do toasting is actually toasting is the opposite. So charring is how hot, how quick. Toasting's how low and slow that heat can go. Again, imagine, like I said, you put your hand over top of like I said, a fire. I mean, it's going to be hot really, really, really quickly. But imagine, like you say, you bring that heat up really, really slow. You can get used to it, and the wood is actually, quote unquote, a deeper in, or it's toasted deeper into the wood, making more of those, like I said, those lignins and different, like I said, binding points for the whiskey to get those sweeter lactones out. But as you're going in deeper into that wood, as the whiskey ages, due to the osmotic pressure through the heating and cooling cycle of, the Ohio River Valley, you're pushing further in. But let's say you don't char the barrel all the way, you could get some of those greener, bitter notes out of the wood, but longer toasting allows you to be more comfortable as it goes in and out over years and years and years, that you're going to have a cohesive product in with it. And that's why most people do 3s and 4s, right? You're charring it, you have a lot of those, like I said, carbon to filter out, a lot of those lignins that bind over years and years and years. You're going to be safe with that. But again, there's times over and over that you'll have some green wood inside of your barrels, some cooperages more than not, and then on the flip side, you'll get some barrels that are completely charred. One of the happy accidents was Kelvin was supposed to make us some Kelvin Char 3 toasted heads, but again, those barrels were extra charred. Again, caught on fire, and we call them the burnt barrel series, and the whiskey turned out to be like, Grippo's potato chips?
Yes.
It was like a barbecue Grippo's potato chip kind of aromatic. It was really interesting to see how sweet, savory, and smoky they were.
So good.
And again, you either hate it or you love it. Sometimes you can find that with some Knob Creek barrels as well. But again, every barrel has a story to tell, and every cooperage has their own way of harvesting the wood, how old they are. We like to talk about, those Dusties back in the day and how they were different than today. And a lot of that has to do with the wood as well. You have to think about, we are harvesting a lot older trees. And again, when you're forcing liquid in there, the tighter the grain, the less it's going to integrate and how quickly it is. It's denser, correct? Again, just like old houses are still around, these newer houses fall down, they burn quicker because the wood's not as old. Again, and how we build these barrels. Back in the day, they built their barrels like tanks, and still today they are. But older wood, more mature wood has that effect. And we use 2 coopers that, specifically harvest older wood, Canton and Sagunt Monroe. They're tighter grain and they hold pressure easier. So when you're heating that whiskey up when it's cold, and you're building that pressure inside that barrel, those tighter grains, they fight back, right? Instead of just, looser grain that, you kind of see all the way through. You still build pressure, but not as much. So again, it's personal opinion what you like or what you don't like. But again, with me, one of the distinctive differences that we're harvesting younger wood nowadays, what are making that big difference into it. That I can go, pieces on that, on for hours about how wood can change the overall aromatics of it. But yeah, that's kind of a brief description.
I like that, and that might be for our next chat as we go a deep dive into the wood of everything. Another process that gets done a lot. You guys do it. You know, Woodford's been known to do it is the double oak version of a whiskey, and as simple as it sounds, it is really that simple. It goes from one barrel to another. But how does it exactly work, and how long do you guys do it for, and how does that play a role in it too?
Well, we do it very differently than a lot of people. And I will straight out say you that a big guy can't do it the way we do it just because it's too much control over it. Again, we do our double oaked in a few different portfolios. We have French oak double oaked, the traditional American double oaked, and actually we're getting into Hungarian double oaked. Again,
Oh,
different woods, different densities, different toasting and charring, all play over into the aromatic factor of what the whiskey is. Again, typically I like to use air dried wood with double oak. My brother and dad and Jesse and Jason will concur. We start with air dried wood, a little tighter of a grain, and then we do a long, deep toast, kind of a medium plus toast. With our American double oak, we then flash char it up to two. Our French oak is just medium toast. Hungarian, just medium toast. And the overall aromatics and the way the finesse of the mouthfeel is very different. Again, American double oak comes of age quicker than our French oak and Hungarian oak. But you have to watch it because each individual cask will come of age quicker. I mean, you can't just say these, 20 barrels will all be ready in 18 months. It just, I mean, not to bash anybody, but it does not work. It just you can't just like you put all the kids in the same room and they're all going to learn the same way. It's not true. I mean, everyone is at its own pace, and every single barrel is different. So you have to really watch and taste these barrels as they're developing and as they're pulling that extra tannin out. Because double oak, in my opinion, I used to hate it as a category. It used to be, in my opinion, so overly extracted that honestly you were drinking oak, and
hmm
it became almost this like this negative thing when I saw it on labels. Again, it was that finessing portion that a lot of people miss. So when you're looking at double oaking, again, that base distillate is super important because you want it to marry into the double oak the best way possible. You want something that's not overly tannic. You want something that's not overly structured with wood. So you're looking at younger whiskeys that are more bright, more floral, more fruity to balance with a double oaked. Again, American oak, French oak, and Hungarian, we have different blends that go into each. And then we basically just watch and we taste and find it where it's at its balancing, when it's at its peak. Again, how we do our single barrel picks of double oak, you put your name on it. But we tell you it could be a couple of weeks, a couple of months away before we actually pull it. The reason being is that, your buddy who might have picked after you might get his first because his barrel came of age quicker. And we're going to put out the best overall quality of a double oak that we can, period. Again, we're unapologetic saying like, sorry, you have to wait, but your barrel honestly is developing different than your friends or your liquor store down the road. But we're tasting them constantly. And then when we find them, they're at their absolute peak. We dump them into stainless steel to stop the overall aging process, allow some oxygen to race back into the overall distillate, and that's a whole other key. That oxygen plays a huge role in your aromatics of whiskey, which I'm really passionate about. Allowing oxygen to marry in with that whiskey for a few days and then bottling it. Again, everyone comes of age quicker, and we're seeing French oak come differently than a Hungarian and then American that very rapidly picks up its double oak. Again, it's a finessing thing where you have to taste and own your own palate and how you like it balanced. And our double oak, we've figured out there's different portfolios that we've picked, and knock on wood, people keep coming back and getting it. So hopefully we're doing a good job with it.
I would have to say you're doing a very good job with it, and you kind of touched on it. The single barrel process, things like that, or your store picks. And James, want to bring you back in here. How does that work? The single barrel picks, and I'm guessing not more and more are doing it nowadays, and each kind of gets something a little different.
Yeah, so our single barrel program before I started. So again, I started in October of 2019. My role went for being brought on as brand manager, and I'm supposed to be traveling throughout Indiana and Kentucky and visiting accounts and talking to clients and working with our distribution reps. But with the pandemic, that kept me on property. And so we quickly had to find some work for me to do essentially. And what happened was at the beginning of 2020, we had three kind of high profile retail bourbon group picks happen for us. And that just kind of skyrocketed our private barrel selection program, which I then kind of took over. And I became the coordinator for. Sorry, Blake just entered the room.
No worries.
So yeah, I became the coordinator essentially working with Christian and with his mom and dad, Dana and Ted, to bring folks to property and to get their selections made. And so in 2019, we went from 50 barrels sold all the way up to 200 in 2020. And in 2021, we are on track to do that again, if not more. And so basically the best way to, if you're interested in that program, is to reach out to our, go to starlightdistillery.com or huberwinery.com. There's a contact us email link that you can submit to, and it'll get to either me, Christian, Dana. We also have a new program coordinator. His name's Andrew. He works in the winery, but is transitioning, kind of doing half and half, and taking over some of those responsibilities, so he may respond as well. But yeah, if you're interested in our barrel program, it's everybody gets a unique experience. We figure out how the best way for you to get your bottles when they're ready. We work with you the whole way. We have an in-house graphic designer that works with your group or your retail store or whatever you are, to get your logo integrated onto the label. So, we do a lot of the work and help you along. So, yeah, it's a super easy process with us. Just putting yourself out there and letting us respond to you.
And I was going to say, I'm sure it's fun when times allow. I mean, and I'm guessing it happens half and half now, whether it's virtual or in person, where people actually get to try several different barrels and see what they want, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've done both. We always try to do more on property because we want folks to have that experience, and it also helps promote the brand. They can take that with them and be able to talk about selling the bottle in store, or putting in why they put it in a cocktail at a restaurant or bar. So we certainly prefer folks to come to property, which again, going back to safety and health regulations during the pandemic, we still maintain those as we tour and sample and bring the group along. But the boys here with Ted, they've done plenty of virtual calls over Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever the platform is. We definitely make it work. So yeah, the possibility is open for that if someone's not able to make it to property.
And we now have a third joining the party in Blake. Welcome, Blake.
Thank you. Good talking to you, Jonathan.
And did you just finish up some bottling? Is that where you were? They made you actually do some work today?
Oh yeah, I've been trying to clear off some snow. We finished bottling the last of our next round of single barrel labels that just came in. So I was helping Jesse and Ryan over in the distillery kind of finish up all that. So got some fun products here down the line. As James mentioned with the single barrels, that we really do enjoy and love to kind of commit to having the best experience here at Starlight Distillery and just bringing people along, even with the pandemic and everything. We like to take the guidelines seriously, but we also love that people still can come up to our facility and see why we're actually unique here and a true farm to bottle, and how many people have just such a passion for the craft of distillation and making of these products. And James, Christian, as I mentioned, Ryan, Jesse, Jason, Parker, who are all over there today, just the passion throughout the entire facility.
And now, whoever wants to answer this one can, as we continue talking here on Flavorful February. Another way that bourbon gets done, or you have those fun experiences, is the finished bottles. Finishing in a different type of barrel. How do you guys go about selecting what to put in those, and how does that affect the flavoring?
Well, like I said, we take finishing very, very seriously. Again, me and him both being crazy about oak and crazy about we're both viticulture and entomology majors, so studying winemaking, studying grape growing. So the cast finishes are something we take ultimately as a like our top tier products. Again, we do a great, great, great bourbon, but we even take it even further to make it even more complex with our finishes. But again, we work with two importers very, very seriously. We're the first distillery over there to get the best premium cask we can. Like again, one of our distributors call us we're harder than any of the Brown Formans for no carbs and have it possible because we go over there and we smell each individual cask for faults. Um, and we look at the integrity of the cask as a whole, making sure it's the best representation of the product. If it might be a sherry, if it's a port, Madeira, X wine cask, whatever might have you, we make sure we check the quality of each individual cask and that it's not faulted. And we're smelling that the actual liquid inside of it is still basically what it should be and not compromised by any acetic factors or any or past fermentations that might have went astray, especially on sweeter casks like Sauternes, Tokais, and stuff like that. Blake can talk about how we blend them.
Yeah, and so it's a really, I mean, Christian probably talked to you a little bit about our mash bills and some of our barrel program that we do here. And with such an extensive kind of broad field to choose from, that actually aids in us in creating the best possible blend for each one of those finishing barrels. And because a lot of people don't take the mindset that each one of these casks is different, each one is going to have a different profile. You can't put the same blend into each one of these and expect those flavors, those aromatics of that product that you're trying to finish in there to mesh together and to create this kind of homogeneous end kind of result that really integrates together nicely. Because Christian talked about some of the sherries, the Tokai, Sauterne, and the sherries compared to the Sauterne and Tokai are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. You have that nutty, dried fruit, kind of autolytic character coming from the sherry, a little bit even of that salinity there, so some of that savoriness. And then on the other end of things, you deal with Tokai and Sauterne, which deal with some more of these thiols, these fruitiness, some of these more melon flavors. And if you put something that's overbearing within the blend into a Tokai, something that's a little bit too oily, has too many of those fusel alcohols, that huskiness, that grain is going to overtake those soft, delicate, fruity aromatics, and it's not going to round out. Whereas if we took a really nice high rye kind of bourbon within there, very clean, finessed, has those cherry fruitiness up front, a nice vanilla in the back with the spice, that's going to complement well with some of that sweetness that's going to come from the aromatics. And in contrast, for the sherry, we can afford a little bit more of a rich, complex blend going in there because that extra characteristic, that nuttiness, that dried fruit is really going to round that out and kind of just add layers of complexity. And that's really what we like with our finishing products is you take something and we're just adding extra layers of complexity that fit within the mold of what that bourbon and what that rye is.
And echoing off what we talked about with the double oaking process, every single cask comes of age differently. You can't just say it's going to be 18 months and just magically everyone comes of age. Again, these casks are of different vintages. They're of different styles. Some are older, some are newer, depending on what they are. And again, we go out there every Saturday or Sunday and we taste a different lot of finishes and we adapt them and we guide them into a place where we like them. Again, it's just not throwing a dart and hopefully get lucky at 10 months. You're kind of guiding it. You're guiding nature on the sense of you want it to, fall into a pocket, and you can do that very simply by being able to bring it out in the cold in the rick house. If we want to kind of speed up and kind of build pressure, we can bring it back inside next to the still and build that pressure up. Again, it's just tasting and figuring out your style of how you want to introduce that product to your market. Again, for us, we have our distinctive style here at Starlight that we're proud about, and we're not going to apologize for it. We are what they are, and we're going to own it. But again, we take that little bit extra care on every single cask that we put out.
And are there any ones that ever just you were like, man, this is going to work out great, and you get it and you go, nope. That was a bad one. Is there any times where you have a few things that just you thought were going to mash together and just didn't go as planned?
I would say maybe didn't go as planned, but within each of the finishing series, there's a level of variability between each cask. To whereas we're going to get something, and sherry is one of those ones that we can have these dark, rich, complex, big bodied, kind of very sherry forward casks, whereas you'll have some that are just going to be more the soft in the back and almost just a compliment there rather than being right up front. And for consumers, as we look at that as in the fact that some consumers are going to like them one way versus the other, because you have some people who aren't quite on board with finishings. They're more traditionalist. They love the bourbon, but having the lighter flavors in the back just to add a little bit of richness without being too front forward might be something that they enjoy, versus that true fanatic of finishing products that might love this heavy, straightforward. And as Christian mentioned, we do have some occasionally that might turn out a little bit different than we imagined, but with how often we're looking at them and how much time we put into making sure that barrel is of quality, we really kind of delineate less of that something not turning out and more of just that variability of it's good in the sense of this way or it's good in the sense of this way.
And that's why we do them as single barrels as well. Again, you'd be surprised of all the people we've had in here from the East Coast to the West Coast to, like I said, all over. And again, it's the each individual person and palate. It's about how you were raised and the culture you were around and how you expect the whiskey to taste. And again, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just where you were going, the experience you had in your life. And that's what we love about Starlight, and that's why we have those variabilities within there in different styles. I mean, some are high rise, some are kind of weeded, a little softer, sweeter, and that's what we want to show. That's why you come here and you try 14, 15 different casks, so we can pick out the exact one that you're proud about and stand behind. It's just not Buffalo Trace or somewhere else that you come and get 4 barrels. Again, and when you're going to another big distillery, you might have these are your 4 options, and then you pick one, they roll that one out, they roll one more in, and there you go. It's another 4. And again, you hopefully will get lucky and you find the one you love. But for us, being a craft distiller, you have to have that like true best foot forward every single time, or you're just going to get ate alive in the marketplace. And that's why we really pick out the individual cask that is best expressive for you and for your group of consumers and your palate and for your palates of your consumers. We really work on that and being able to give you something that you'll be proud to stand behind, not that you just got lucky that day. Yeah. And that's kind of what we want to show.
Well, and that takes me back to our last episode, or our first time talking to y'all, and what I found very interesting, and something that if you're going out there and buying a Starlight bottle, take a look to see who picked it, because you guys each put your name on it, because you all kind of like something a little different as well. So you might see the T or the C or B Huber, depending on who picked that exact barrel, right?
Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to us 3 being, like I said, the same family, even have different palates. And again, nor wrong nor right. It's just you got to be proud about how you like to drink whiskey. And again, we all drink very differently. So it's just owning your own palate. And like I said, you like my style, you like Blake's, you like Dad's. It is what it is. But it comes from the same house, but with those different.
And then we're always trying out there too, is we know that each and every consumer out there has a different palate, has a different preference, has different tasting sensations basically. And when we're going through and actually choosing single barrels, we're gonna be as non-biased as we can, because we're just looking for what is a product of quality. Does it meet our standards of having the right aromatics, that nose up front? Does it have the right mouthfeel? Does it have the right finish within it? And do all those combine together to make something special? And granted, it might not be to one of our palates, but if all these bridge together, that creates something that's truly special. And then, as Christian mentioned, when we work with the consumers, we work with our different clientele, this really helps us to create that experience of, okay, let's truthfully figure out what do you like in a bourbon versus what is actually out there on the market. Let's find you a bourbon that fits your mold. And that's something that you can put your name on. Obviously, you see that we have all these different people. We can customize the bottom, and that's something that you put your name on, and that's something that you truthfully, in the end, love as a product.
Yeah, I love that, and like I said, I've never had anything bad from y'all, and you can tell you put your heart and soul into what you do. And before I let you go, kind of what's next for you guys? I mean, obviously, we have survived 2020, and we're now into 2021. So, what's next? You kind of talked about the liqueur that'll be coming out in the summer. Anything else that you can actually say that is recorded?
Yeah. Well, knock on wood, we got very lucky. We're just putting in 3 more new fermenters into our still house to kind of, as we go up in production, we're going to, again, be very slow of how we're going to gauge up. But again, we want to be able to work with this 4.5 to 6-year-old whiskey, but we also want to push the bar and go older and older. And for us, that is putting more barrels back. So we are changing the still house up, getting some more fermenters. But again, we're not going to go so big that us as a family can't touch it. Again, we're not going to go to a night shift. We're going to be able to touch it. We're going to be able to work with it. Again, that was basically for us to keep on raising the bar, but raising the bar in a way that we still have that hands-on, that we can still make those cuts. We're not going to lose, what our philosophy was with each individual run. It's its own individual, you're creating something new every single day. You're making the best whiskey every single day. And we didn't want to lose that. Lucky enough that we're able to get 3 more fermenters in and hopefully get another bigger pot still in here that we can run the same time as our other one, but we're able to still make the cuts. Instead of making 1 cut, we're going to be making 2 cuts. But again, we can still do that every single day while we're here, rather than go into this big ethanol plant style where we're not here at night. Again, we want to be able to do every single blend and cut every single cask and be able to proof it the way we want it to be proofed. Oh, and yeah, you can want to.
So, one of the other things, we have kind of a allocated limited release product line extension happening this year, for multiple markets. Basically, we will be working with our distributors who will be, selling to their accounts. 5 different allocated bourbons this year. And they'll be released throughout the entire year. So, 1 at a time throughout the entire year. So you have Double Oaked first, which will be coming out soon. And then after that will be a bottled and bond release that we'll be doing. After that is the Old Rickhouse Rye, which a lot of folks are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it goes
Sherry.
Is the 4th one, and then a port. So sherry finished bourbon, and then wrapping up the year, or actually probably like 3rd quarter with with the August time frame with the port finished bourbon. So all of those will hit the market separately, like 1 at a time, like I said. But it's exciting to be growing the bourbon product line just from Carl T and private store selections that you'll see in retail accounts, to include all of those into the general market as well. So that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity too for us to have some of our smaller kind of shops and retail stores that have supported us have some of our products, give them an opportunity that they might not be able to come select a whole barrel, but they're able to actually get some of these allocated products, pull them into their stores and show their consumer base, because we want to keep building those relationships. We want to keep showing people what we have. And this is just a fantastic opportunity to us to produce a very high quality, some of these very small batch limited blends, and be able to distribute them throughout kind of our subset of distribution that we have so far.
Yeah.
That is awesome, and James, Christian, Blake, I really appreciate you taking time to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive. We didn't go all the way, and maybe that'll be for the next one. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Well, thank you.
And thank you again. Yeah, this is awesome.
It's always a blast talking with Christian, Blake, and James from Starlight Distillery there in Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. And as I talked about earlier, don't forget about our Drinking Buddies monthly giveaway. We have quite the lineup this time, all whiskeys and bourbons. Here's the list one more time for y'all. Cascade Moon Edition number 2 small batch, which is at least 16 years old. A George Dickel single barrel 15-year-old. Barrel Craft Spirits 15-year-old. Barrel R Media, which is bourbon whiskey finished in brandy rum and Sicilian Amaro cask. The Starlight Distillery Double Oaked Bourbon, Traverse City Whiskey Barrel Proof Bourbon, and out of Middle West, the Straight Ride Dark Pumpernickel Whiskey. Those are all sample sizes. You could win all 7 by just signing up for our Drinking Buddies monthly giveaway club. Go to any of our social media at Hops and Spirits on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Click the link. It's that simple, and it's free, so don't wait around. Also, make sure you check out our friends of the podcast, Dad's on the Deck podcast and One Sip Beer Review. Both of them are on Instagram and are definitely worthy of a follow, a like, and just a pure enjoyment of the podcast or the videos that they produce. Until next time, cheers, everyone.